Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Headlines. Today, we take a closer look at the stories shaping our communities and our future, going past the surface and into the context, the impact, and the conversations that matter. I'm DJ Moises. In the wake of Typhoon Tino's destructive flooding, two key leaders in Cebu are pushing to address the region's flooding issues. Governor Pamela Baricuatro is championing the revival of the Mega Cebu Plan, which proposes a comprehensive water management system to tackle both flooding and water scarcity. On the other hand, Vice Governor Glenn Anthony Soco is advocating for the revival of the Metro Cebu Flood and Drainage System Master Plan, arguing that the recent flooding could have been prevented with better drainage infrastructure. While their efforts are currently fragmented, quote unquote, combining the strengths of both plans could lead to a more effective long-term solution for Cebu's flooding challenges. Now, with two different plans on the table, can Cebu effectively tackle its flooding crisis, or will the lack of unified approach slow down progress? So, yesterday, as we know, and if you have joined Beyond the Headlines, we interviewed Glenn Soco, and he was able to articulate what the Metro Cebu flooding and drainage was about. And then eventually we found out in the afternoon that the Cebu provincial government is also advocating for Metro Cebu Master Plan. And for those of us who have not followed the progress of these two projects, it actually led to a perception that these two were fragmented or different projects. So let's tackle them one by one, starting with the Mega Cebu Master Plan. So this plan, which the provincial government led by Governor Pamela Baricuatro, is the long-delayed blueprint, which includes a new integrated water management system to address flooding and water scarcity in Metro Cebu. And as we know, the need for the plan is urgent due to the impact of Typhoon Tino, which killed 232 people as of this writing, with 150 fatalities in Cebu, and another 57 people in Cebu are still missing. Typhoon Tino affected 1.5 million families, causing widespread damage across various regions. The storm resulted to significant loss of life, injuries, missing persons, and destruction of homes and infrastructure, not to mention economic damages reaching hundreds of millions of peso. So how does Mega Cebu Plan address these concerns? The Mega Cebu Master Plan created in 2015, and it served as a master plan to manage water and prevent flooding. And this has stalled since 2020 due to the lack of meetings by the coordinating body, leaving flood control efforts fragmented. The revival of the Mega Cebu Plan sparks debate on whether coordination alone is enough or if deeper environmental issues must be tackled. Baricuatro is pushing for a better interlocal cooperation to address problems like urban sprawl, proper drainage, and climate change risks. There's also Cebu geological problem, which a lot of experts and even citizens are already raising, such as the unique karst geology, which makes it prone to flooding, sinkholes, and landslides. And protecting this landscape is crucial for managing water flow, but local engineers lack the necessary training in karst engineering. There are also impacts on water system because developments in forested areas such as roads, resorts, can disrupt the watershed and worsen environmental risk, especially when karst formation are not properly understood. So the immediate next step here is political. Baricuatro will present the revived Mega Cebu initiative to the Regional Development Council Infrastructure Committee to formally prioritize a province-wide water management system and restore the collaborative model abandoned in 2020. So that's the piece on Mega Cebu Master Plan. No. Now let's have a little bit of a refresher in terms of the revival of the other project, which we covered yesterday when we interviewed the Vice Governor. So Cebu Vice Governor Glenn Anthony Soco called for the revival of the Metro Cebu Flood and Drainage System Master Plan after the devastating flooding caused by Typhoon Tino. He argued that the flooding could have been prevented with proper drainage infrastructure, which had been developed but ignored. Soco criticized the government's reactionary disaster response and stressed the need for long-term, proactive solutions rather than relying on emergency measures after the fact. The master plan, introduced in 2013 with support from the Department of Public Works and Highways, or DPWH, and Japan's JICA, was intended to manage rainfall runoff and mitigate flooding from Danao City to Karkar City. But despite the initial funding in 2018 and 2019, national support stalled and the plan was abandoned. Soco condemned this failure and called out the culture of governance that focuses on calamity declarations and relief efforts instead of prevention. He urged for honest, science-based solutions and shift away from empty promises of resilience, as the people of Cebu are tired of ineffective responses. So those are actually a lot of information to our viewers, and just in case you also wish to comment and join us in the conversation, then please do. Now, if we look at these two plans, so we in Sanstar earlier today tried to make some sense out of it, and I think that's my first comment to our public leaders. I'm actually hopeful that they would sit together and plan on how communication is going to be cascaded. Because what's happening now is we could see from our news feed that there seems to be two fragmented plans. But if we look at it based on the initial research that we did, these two plans are after all related, but they were just presented by two different leaders, sounding as though these two plans don't seem to connect, but they have actually a lot more in common than the differences that the impression is actually creating. So allow me then to check the comments on our live feed. Yes, so we have a comment here from our regular viewer, si Patron Verga Grande, and he actually said na in short, lain-lain ang agenda kay ang usa gadua man, no. So I will not comment about which one is actually or who is playing, and he actually said that the two plans should have not even been entertained. It should be what is agreed by Capital. So who is the vice governor to do that? No. So those are the two comments that we have on the feed. No. So he actually further said that this appears like it's a battle of personalities. I'm actually hopeful that this is not a battle of personalities. So allow me then to attempt at integrating the two projects and why they are more similar rather than different. So if we look at the Mega Cebu plan, yes, if we look at the Mega Cebu plan, it's the vision for 2050, and it's a roadmap that was created as early as 2015. No? So this is again with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA, in cooperation with Metro Cebu. Now there are four pillars, no, and believe me, no, this sounds a mouthful, but there's an attempt to still simplify this. So the four pillars are competitiveness, livability, mobility, and metropolitan management system. No, so as you can see, this is really an integrated plan for Cebu. That's why it's called the Mega Cebu Master Plan. Now, let's take a look at then on the second project, no, which is the drainage, which is the mega. Sorry, I'm lost with the terms already, no. So which is the Metro Cebu Drainage Master Plan, no, which was also mentioned yesterday, no, and that plan is actually a more specific actionary component that is supposed to impact the four pillars that I mentioned earlier. No, so allow me to go into the details, no, of the Cebu Master Drainage Plan. So the plan is more specific to flooding as a critical challenge. So it includes stormwater management, drainage improvement, and flood mitigation infrastructure. So the flood control then, as far as the Mega Cebu framework is concerned, is not an isolated problem. So the flood control then is linked to the pillars of Mega Cebu plan, which I mentioned earlier. So this is land use planning, which is supposed to avoid issues in construction in flood-prone areas. Di ba nindot? No? And then second, it's also road transport networks, ensuring that roads are not blocked during flooding. And then the third is wastewater and storm water management system, which is about proper drainage to reduce contamination and health hazards. So if we look at it then, the two projects are actually very much related. So the other one, the Mega Cebu project, is a strategic framework. And the Metro, and this was the one that's being championed by Governor Pamela Baricuatro. And the Metro Cebu flood control drainage system, which is also advanced by Vice Governor Glenn Soco, are specific operational level initiatives that implements the system in a broader master plan. So if we summarize it, Mega Cebu is vision and coordination, while the flood control and drainage system is on the ground execution. So do we have some feedback? Because we would also like to invite our viewers also for them to be able to see whether our attempt at integrating the two projects is actually coming across to our viewers, because this is our way to speak about the context and conversations that are actually behind what we are just reading, no, on the news. So again, from Patron Verga Grande, he actually said that I understand, but nevertheless, capitals should have a unified statement, which is, by the way, what we are also looking for. In other countries, you can never hear the vice president, vice governor, vice mayor for a reason. Only in the Philippines. So it's a valid comment also. And it is, and another comment also, if it is very much related, then it should have been integrated and pitched by the governor / capital and not by the vice governor. So I think what Patron is actually saying is there has to be a unified approach, and the spokesperson for this should be the provincial governor, not the vice governor. Now, of course, here in Beyond the Headlines, we would also like to welcome different perspectives. So if there's anybody from our viewers who would also disagree from this, but please do so, no? Because this is also your time and your part to be heard, because we also don't like to just focus on one side. Now, if you ask for my opinion, I think I will have to agree with this one. Especially in a time of Tino, it's important for us to see our leaders working together. And two leaders saying seemingly two different things, when in fact they are just one thing, can only add to the confusion. If we look at the change management curve, which can also be used in a disaster such as Typhoon Tino, communication is the first piece. And if we look at it on a corporate-private sector standpoint, in this time, it's better that there's just one leader appointed to do that communication. Then after the overarching approach, then we move towards the actions. And that's when we would be expecting more people talking, because these actions also are specific to a certain vertical. So that's when we would be expecting more leaders joining in the conversation. And then towards the tail end of the change, that's when we would always go back to one leader also doing that conversation. And that is to provide closure on the project. So that's my opinion. And to a huge extent, I agree, no, with what one of our viewers just said earlier. And again, just like what I also mentioned, if you think otherwise, then please also join us in this live conversation so that your perspective would also be considered and heard. Sige. So now, allow me then, since we are still also going through the many comments, no, that we are seeing on the feed, no. So one of the key questions also that the general public, and that includes myself, is how do we prevent duplication or gaps between Mega Cebu's vision and other flood control projects like the Metro Cebu flood control and drainage system. If I am to complicate this conversation, at least we also asked the Vice Governor about it yesterday, there are also 414 flood control projects courtesy of the DPWH. So what is the space of these 414 projects, and how do they relate, no, to the Metro Cebu flood control drainage system? And how do they also relate, or are they not in relation to the Mega Cebu master plan? So we have here a breaking comment, and yes, and yes, and I was reminded also that yesterday, the Vice Governor actually also emphasized, no, that he will be coordinating with Cebu Provincial Governor Pamela Baricuatro. So we are also hopeful, because these are also developing stories. So we are also hopeful that today, more of those conversations would also begin to transpire and would be communicated to the Cebuanos, the general public like us. So that's the first question here, no, from people also, which is how can we prevent duplication of gaps, because we are operating in limited resources, no. The other thing, and on which we are also hoping in the coming days, no, is for the plans, whether we are adopting Mega Cebu or we will prioritize the more granular flood and drainage control plan, for them to also communicate measurable targets. I know that this is also not the usual picture that we are seeing in terms of government projects, but this is also a time of urgency. And in a time of urgency, it's also important for people to see where we are headed and what's the pace, no? How are we progressing towards that direction? And the easiest way to communicate that is through some form of a measure. As we can see, this is a vision. Mega Cebu is a vision for 2020, but it is a roadmap that started supposedly, before it was abandoned, started as early as 2015. So most likely, there really are action steps and measures that are already in place leading to 2050. So since the plan has already been abandoned in 2020, and since it looked like both leaders, no, so the governor and the vice governor are seemingly one in terms of advancing this project, then it's the sooner we can communicate where the updates are needed, because the vice governor also said that some information also needs updating, and then where this plan is going to land. Is it still 2050? And then how to get there in the form of measures. And we are hoping that we will be seeing more about that. And there's also another comment here that the flood on control can't be seen as isolated. And yes, we have communicated that also earlier. No, so the Mega Cebu Master Plan, and then they have it has the 4 pillars, and then the Metro Cebu drainage and flood control is the operational part that links to the 4 pillars. So yes, they should not be isolated plans. The other also comment here is infrastructure alone won't solve flooding. No? So a resilient Cebu also depends on citizens' understanding and participation in water management. And this is actually also a valid point. I think the Vice Governor mentioned this yesterday in the interview, that while there is an integrated plan that the provincial government is advocating, it's also important that everyday citizens, no, can also do our part. And a huge part of this is on taking care of our wastes, no? So that is to reduce the use of non-biodegradable like plastic, and then to recycle them before we dispose them into our rivers. Because every time naagyo flood, no, it's also sad that along with the flood also comes garbage and plastics. So that would also be, these are also indicators of our behavior that we also need to change. No? The other commentary here actually is Mega Cebu is a vision that spans decades, like multiple cities and countless stakeholders. So that means that there is no single leader, office, or LGU can tackle the challenges of urban growth and climate risks and infrastructure gaps alone. So I think what we were just saying earlier is to have one main spokesperson. But yes, we would agree that this is an integrated move also along with the different LGUs. And if I am to point here, I think to further underscore this comment, our rivers and watersheds in Cebu province are actually shared, no? And allow me to share this data. For example, for Mananga River watershed, no, this is actually shared by Talisay, Minglanilla, Toledo, and Cebu City, by the way, which is a highly urbanized city, no? And it's not really under the supervision of Cebu provincial government, no? But Mananga River, while it's only affecting actually these 4 cities, these are actually crucial for our water system. So heavy siltation and quarrying and informal settlements have actually worsened the floods downstream, particularly in Talisay and Minglanilla. So the question actually here is in terms of taking action, it appears like this is a consolidated efforts, no? Because if we solve the problem even if we solve the problem downstream, and then we don't do something upstream, then the flood problem will still continue, because ang water di man na siya kanang mo stop lang from one local government unit to the other, mo flow man gyud na siya. So that means it's a consolidated effort. So the other example also of another controversial shared water resource is ang kaning Buhisan watershed, no? So this is with Cebu City and Talisay City, and this is home to the water system called Buhisan Dam. And the flooding downstream areas of Labangon, Mambaling, Talisay, it always ties back to the situation and the land use in the upper watershed. So yes, it has to be a consolidated effort. Now, So so I think that's our commentary just for the two projects. However, towards the end of the day, we also found an additional perspective, no? And this time there's a revival of the project Noah, no? So what is Noah? Because it seemed like this is an additional entry to the plan that the provincial government also wants to roll out. So Project Noah is the disaster preparedness and hazard mapping initiative launched under former Governor Hilario Davide III. Assistant Administrator Aldwin Impase said the project's data will be updated to reflect challenges in land use, noting that 30% of Cebu's protected areas are now used for farming and other purposes. Impase stressed the need to balance development with environmental protection, citing recent reviews of quarry operations ordered by Provincial Governor Pamela Baricuatro. The Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office is coordinating with the UP Resilience Institute to update hazard maps and ensure that future development decisions are scientific and evidence-based. Project Noah, established in 2011 under President Aquino, was defunded in 2017 but remains active under the UP NOAA Center. Cebu's participation was initially funded to support recovery after Typhoon Yolanda in 2013. No? So making sense out of this development, because I think this development was first revived and shared to the public in November 10. So that's about 2 days ago. This one is more on the reporting. And this one is more also in terms of hazard mapping, which is, by the way, useful to both the flood control and drainage management plan and ultimately Mega Cebu. So again, if we look at the patterns, all of these three are very related. They're not necessarily fragmented, and it's just a matter of having a more unified communication so that the public will understand better what these projects are about, what are the objectives of these projects, and how we can help as the public to make these projects happen. So if we don't have further comments now on from our viewers, then I would, for now, wrap up this conversation. Oh, there's another one before we end, and it's still coming from Patron Verga Grande, and he actually said that, by the way, as of today, still not a single congressman and contractor from Cebu imprisoned, and not a single DPWH and COA official from Region 7 was fired, and now the ex-secretary was able to fly to the United States. I think a lot more people are now looking for accountability, and yes, accountability is not about revenge. It's also part of the healing process for people to make sense, no, of what truly happened and how permanent correction can be done moving forward. Another comment actually here, the flood control scheme undeniably began during build, as per Discaya. And capital at that time was what the good friends, no, with the OPAV, and therefore also that with DPWH, and they were able to do with the Regional Development Council. So I think there's a lot of feedback that's are also being shared here. And what we are doing here in Beyond the Headlines is to look at the context of this conversation. And these conversations are not just ends, no, in themselves, no, but these conversations can also serve as a starter so that we would be able to digest all this that are happening around us and make better sense and purpose out of this information that we are also receiving from our leaders. Tomorrow, by the way, we will be having an interview also, this time coming from a leader of the United Architects of the Philippines in Cebu. And he will also be giving his insights on what happened and what we can do moving forward. So for now, that wraps up the today's edition of Beyond the Headlines, and we hope that today's conversation is just a start for us to be able to shed light on the bigger picture behind the story. And we'd like to thank our viewers for being with us today. I'm DJ Moises, and thank you. Good afternoon, and see you tomorrow.